Christmas Eve. The fire crackled gently in my empty living room. No stockings, no laughter, just me, and the letter I never thought I'd write. Effective January 1st, I will no longer be making the mortgage payments for your home. I signed it slowly, not because I hesitated, but because I wanted to remember how calm I felt. 1 year ago, I stood in this same room, wrapping presents for my grandchildren. This year, I wasn't even invited. My daughter-in-law had made it clear. We're keeping things simple this Christmas. Just us. Please respect that. No, Mom. No, thank you. Just silence after. I reread the voicemail from my son Daniel, his voice shaking. I tried to convince her, Mum, but I can't argue every time. It's easier this way. Easier. That word used to mean peace. Now, it tasted like betrayal. I turned off the fireplace. The glow died in seconds. They thought I wouldn't do it, that I'd swallow my hurt like always, smile through the holidays, and keep paying their bills. But this time, I did something I'd never done before. I chose myself, and in doing so, I set them free. I wasn't always the type to be left out. When I was a child, my mother used to make Christmas feel like magic. We didn't have much, but we had music, clove oranges, handmade garlands, and warmth that lingered long after the tree was gone. She'd whisper, "Presence matters more than presents." And we believed her. I carried that into my own family. When Daniel was little, I tried to pass it on. The quiet magic, the small things that said, "You belong." Even when his father passed, I held it together for Daniel. His first Christmas without his dad, he was just 7. I remember him wrapping a pine cone in red tissue paper and saying, "It's for you, Mommy, so you never feel alone." That pine cone still sits in the top drawer of my nightstand. No matter where I moved, it moved with me. And when Daniel met Emily in college, I wanted her to feel that same welcome. I baked her favourite cookies. I let her choose the holiday menu. I stepped back when she wanted space. But year after year, that space grew into silence. She smiled in photos, but never looked at me in the eye. She hugged my grandkids, but handed them gifts without ever using the word grandma. The first time I truly felt the shift was 3 years ago. They hosted Christmas for the first time in their new house. I arrived with arms full of gifts and a pot of stew Daniel used to beg for. But when I walked in, Emily took the pot from me, smiled and said, "Oh, we actually already made our own version. Yours might be too heavy for the kids." She handed it to her sister, who walked it straight to the garage fridge. Not even the kitchen. I stood there holding a gift bag, suddenly unsure if I had misunderstood the invite altogether. After that day, I started noticing more. Little things. Small slights that never came with confrontation, but cut just the same. At Thanksgiving, Emily would call everyone to the table, except me. I'd be setting out the last of the plates while they toasted each other with champagne. 1 year, they sent out a family Christmas card. Beautiful photo, all 4 of them in matching pajamas. My name, not even in the mailing list. Daniel always had an excuse. "It was just a quick print run, Mum. She forgot to add you, that's all." Forgot. I gave birth to him, nursed him through fevers, stayed up all night the week he had pneumonia, and now I was someone to be forgotten. But I didn't complain. I didn't want to stir things up, didn't want Daniel to feel torn, so I kept showing up. I brought gifts. I smiled in the background of their family portraits, wearing the same sweater 3 years in a row, because it was the only one Emily said was neutral enough for her aesthetic. Sometimes I wondered if the kids even knew I was part of their story. They called me Grandma out of habit, but I wasn't allowed to take them out alone, wasn't trusted to babysit. Emily once texted, "Appreciate you offering, but we've already got a sitter lined up. Just easier that way. That phrase again. Easier. What about kinder? What about fair? I stopped baking. I stopped decorating. The lights never went up that year. No carols, no cookies, no cinnamon on the stove. My house began to look like how I felt, tidy, silent, uninvited. It was the week before Christmas. I'd already bought the kids new winter coats, wrapped them in gold foil with handmade tags. I even tucked in little notes. One said, "Stay warm, stay kind." Emily texted me the next morning. No greeting, no thanks. Hi. We've decided to have a quiet Christmas this year, just us. Hope you understand. I stared at my phone, read it twice, 3 times. I waited. Maybe Daniel would call. Maybe it was just a mistake. By evening, nothing came. Just silence. The kind that feels loud. The kind that tells you the decision's been made and you're not part of it. I stood in the hallway with the gifts in my hands, pine-scented wrapping paper, little bows I'd saved from last year, everything ready for a celebration that no longer existed. And then I did something I'd never done before. I turned around, walked to the fireplace, and started unwrapping each one. I folded the coats, placed them in a donation bag, and wrote one final tag, "For someone who's still welcome." That night, I opened a bottle of wine, lit one candle, and for the first time in years, I ate Christmas dinner alone, quietly, deliberately, without apology. I didn't tell Daniel, didn't confront Emily, didn't beg for inclusion. I just disappeared from the group chats, from the plans, from the background of their photos. They didn't even notice until the bank called them 3 weeks later. I didn't plan a comeback. There was no grand scheme, no list of goals or revenge fantasies, just silence and space. Enough space to hear my own breath again, enough quiet to remember who I was before I started dimming for their comfort. I started with something small. I opened the Etsy shop I'd always talked about. At first, it was just candles, hand-poured, scented with cedar and orange peel, each one wrapped in brown paper and tied with linen string. I called the line presents. After something my mother used to say, at night, while the house slept, I poured wax and designed labels. During the day, I worked part-time at the library, restocking shelves and greeting the regulars with their overdue notices. No one knew I was rebuilding. No one asked, and I liked it that way. I sold my first dozen candles in week 3. They went to strangers. People who didn't know my story, but wrote back to say, "This scent makes my home feel whole." And I cried. Not out of sadness, but because someone, somewhere, felt warmth from something I made. That was more than I'd felt in years. I didn't post about it, didn't tell Daniel, didn't send a "look at me now" text to Emily. I just kept going, and every time I poured a new batch, I whispered under my breath, "Still welcome, still worthy." It started with 1 local order, then 3, then an email from a woman named Charlotte, a boutique owner who had found my candles through a mutual friend. She asked if I could do a custom run for the holidays. I nearly dropped my tea when I read the message. That weekend, I packed 12 boxes, each tied perfectly, each with a tiny card. "Presents is a gift." Charlotte loved them. She reordered, and then she posted about it. I didn't expect much, but by Monday, I had 83 new followers, 15 messages, and more orders than I had jars. People began asking about the story behind the name, and I told them, gently, simply, that sometimes we lose our place in a family, but we can still create warmth in the world. And something shifted. People began writing, not just about the candles, but about their own stories. Estranged mothers, forgotten daughters, women who had stepped back quietly and wondered if they still mattered. They told me my shop made them feel seen, and that made me feel real again. At the library, one of the regulars, Mr. Jacobs, stopped me by the door. "Are you the candle lady everyone's talking about on Facebook?" I laughed, really laughed for the first time in months. "Guess I am." He smiled. "My wife bought one. Said it smells like her grandmother's kitchen. You've got something special." I walked home that day with a little more air in my lungs, a little more certainty in my step. I still hadn't heard from Daniel. No one from their house had noticed my absence, but for the first time, I wasn't waiting. By spring, the shop had a rhythm. Every week, I poured, packed, and mailed out warmth in glass jars. It wasn't about money, it was about proof. Proof that I could build something without waiting for permission, without begging to belong. The house, once so still, now smelled of cedar and bergamot. My kitchen counters, once empty, now lined with drying racks and handwritten notes. And I started dressing differently, not to impress, but to reflect who I was becoming. No more neutral sweaters for family photos. Now it was linen aprons, bold earrings, a scarf in my hair. Little choices that said, "I'm here. I take up space. I don't apologise for it." One afternoon, I caught my reflection in the mirror, and for a second, I didn't recognise her, not because she looked unfamiliar, but because she looked free. That night, I brewed tea in my favourite mug, the one that used to sit in the back of the cabinet, the one Emily once called too loud. Now it sat front and centre, loud and proud. I didn't need an audience anymore, didn't crave updates from Daniel, didn't stalk their social media for signs of absence or guilt. I had my space, my scent, my name, and with every candle I poured, every order I shipped, I stitched a quiet message back into my own life. You're still here. You're still you. I was labelling candle jars when the notification buzzed, just a soft ping on my phone from Daniel. The message was simple. "Mum, Emily wanted me to ask if you'd come for Christmas this year." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering above it. My hand still smelled like eucalyptus and honey. For a moment, I froze. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I suddenly remembered the last time I held their kids. Tiny fingers tracing the veins on the back of my hand. Eyes too young to understand silence between adults. It had been nearly a year since that quiet Christmas. Since I was gently erased, and now out of nowhere no apology, no explanation, just an invitation. Was it guilt? Was someone missing my casseroles? Or had Emily simply decided I was useful again? A dozen responses ran through my head. Sharp ones, witty ones, wounded ones. But I typed nothing. Instead, I placed the phone down, gently, like it might explode, and I walked to the window. The street was quiet. Sunlight spilled across the porch, where no one had stood all year. I felt not anger, not sadness, just a quiet tilt inside me, like something had shifted. And I wasn't sure if I could or even should go back, but part of me still wanted to see those little fingers again. Part of me still wanted to belong. That night, I lit one of my own candles, wool and smoke, the scent I saved for nights when my thoughts ran too loud. I stared at the flame, letting it flicker shadows across the ceiling, and I asked myself a question I hadn't dared speak aloud. What if going back means undoing everything I've rebuilt? I didn't have an answer, just more silence, and the scent of cedar curling through the room. Later, I called Nina. She was shelving books at the library, but she answered with her usual calm. "Let me guess, they want you back in the picture, but not in the frame." I smiled. She always knew how to cut through the fog. "It's Christmas. The kids didn't do anything wrong. And you didn't do anything wrong either." Silence. "So, what do you want, really?" she asked. "I want to walk into that house and not feel like a ghost. Then maybe go in as something else." "Like what?" "Yourself." It was a simple word, but it hit like truth. I hung up and walked to the mirror. Same scarf, same tired eyes, but not the same woman. I wasn't going back to prove a point, I wasn't going back to beg, and I wasn't going back just for Emily's benefit. If I went, it would be for me, to reclaim space I had been quietly erased from, to see those little hands again, without shrinking in guilt or shame, and maybe to let them see who I had become. I didn't reply to Daniel's message right away. Instead, I walked into my kitchen and took out the tin box where I kept old Christmas cards, years' worth of glitter, fingerprints, misspelled grandma in crayon. I flipped through them slowly, not out of longing, but to remind myself of what had once been true, what was still worth protecting. The next morning, I emailed Charlotte from the boutique. I'd like to send a special batch for a family gathering. Not for sale, just presents. She replied within an hour. Let me know what you need. The world could use more candles like that. I spent the week making them, not flashy ones, simple jars with soft labels. Each candle had a name handwritten on the tag. Daniel, Emily, each of the grandkids, and one for me. Still glowing, I wrapped each one with care, placed them in a box, and tied it with green velvet ribbon. Then I baked. Not because anyone expected it, but because I remembered what it felt like to walk into a house that smelled like orange zest and cinnamon, and I wanted to bring something that didn't ask for permission. Finally, I chose my outfit. A soft burgundy dress I'd never worn. It had pockets and weight. Not flashy, not invisible, just me. And before I left, I lit one more candle. My favourite blend, the one that smelled like quiet hope. Then I whispered to the empty house. This time, I walk in, and I don't shrink, and I lock the door behind me. The driveway was already full when I arrived. I parked 2 houses down, like I always used to, out of habit, out of caution. The candle box sat in the passenger seat, velvet ribbon slightly askew. I adjusted it twice before picking it up. Walking up the sidewalk, I noticed the small things, the wreath Emily always hung too early, the cracked corner of the welcome mat, the sound of laughter through double-pane glass. I took a breath and rang the bell. A pause. Then the door opened, and Daniel stood there, older, tired in a way I hadn't seen before, but his eyes softened the moment he saw me. Hey, Mom. Hi. That was all we said, but in his quiet smile, I read something else. Maybe not apology, but recognition. He stepped aside, and I walked in. The living room looked the same. Same garland, same couch, same family photo over the fireplace, minus me. Emily appeared from the kitchen, holding a tray of drinks. Her smile was curated. Glad you could make it. Thank you for the invitation. I said it gently, like laying down a card in a game I wasn't playing anymore. She nodded, glanced at the box in my hands. What's that? Something small, for everyone. I placed it on the table and took off my coat slowly, not to be noticed, but to feel my own skin in this room again. The grandkids ran in. Tiny arms, squeals, confusion, joy. They hugged me like no time had passed, and I knelt down to their level, whispering, still glowing, you know. The littlest one blinked, like the candles. Exactly. And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a guest. I felt present, planted, whole. And I remembered what I told myself before I left the house. This time I walk in and I don't shrink. Emily poured sparkling cider into glass flutes, the kind I gave her as a wedding gift years ago. She didn't mention it, just filled each one, careful not to spill. Her smile stiff as the linen napkins folded on each plate. Daniel hovered beside her, small talk, shoulders tense. Across the room, I sat near the tree, a soft chair tucked into the edge of the action. From here, I watched Emily announce, "Dinner's ready buffet style, let's not make a fuss." Watched her glide past me without eye contact. Watched her mother seated with a napkin already on her lap, eye me like I'd wandered into the wrong house. I stood slowly and made my way to the dining table. The ham smelled like rosemary and cloves her signature. The salad bowl had my old wooden servers in it. She must have found them when we boxed up my kitchen things. "Smells wonderful," I said, placing a scoop of potatoes on my plate. She nodded, didn't reply. I found a seat at the far end, beside one of the older grandkids who immediately leaned in. "Grandma, are you staying overnight?" "Not tonight, sweetheart." "Why not? Dad said you always used to." I didn't look back at that, and silence bloomed, just long enough to be noticed. "We're keeping it simple this year," she said lightly. "Just the immediate family." Her voice wrapped tight in sugar, but the edges cut anyway. Daniel glanced at me. I smiled gently and touched the rim of my glass. Then, "I'm grateful to be included, even for a little while." Across the table, someone coughed. Silverware clinked. A forced toast followed. "To new beginnings," Emily said. "And quiet nights," added her mother. The clink of crystal followed. But I didn't raise my glass. I just held it, felt the chill against my palm, and let the words settle, unsipped. The plates clattered gently as dessert was passed around. Pumpkin pie, store-bought, but arranged with care. Emily cut each slice with precision, sliding them onto small plates, like she was portioning control. The kids were already slipping into sugar giggles, chasing each other between legs and folding chairs. Daniel tried to wrangle them, but ended up laughing, just a little. "Grandma, want whipped cream?" one of them asked. "Just a bit," I smiled, holding out my plate. He piled it high anyway, grinning. "Oops." Everyone chuckled, even Emily. For a second, it felt almost easy, until her mother leaned in, voice just loud enough for the table to hear. Back in our day, mothers-in-law knew how to step back. The words landed sharp, draped in sweetness, but cold underneath. I didn't react, not right away, but Daniel did. He turned to his mother-in-law, voice calm but deliberate. "Actually, she's the one who made this Christmas happen." Emily looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" Daniel gestured toward the candle box. "You think the mortgage payments paused themselves?" A beat of silence, thick, heavy. "Mum didn't tell anyone," he added. "But she helped us, quietly, every month, even when we didn't ask." Emily's hand froze on her fork. Her mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. No one moved. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The spark had lit. And not from me. The air felt different after that. No one said much. Even the children quieted, sensing something had shifted. Emily stood still. Daniel gave her a look half apology, half invitation to be honest. But she looked down at her plate. I stood, gently brushing my hands against my dress. "It's getting late," I said softly. Daniel looked up. "You sure?" "Yes. I've had enough light for tonight." I reached for my coat, still draped over the back of the chair. One of the grandkids ran up and tugged my hand. "Can I walk you to the door?" "You may," I smiled. We moved slowly through the hallway, past the kitchen, past the photos on the wall. I noticed a new one, all of them at last summer's beach trip. I wasn't in it. And somehow, it didn't sting. Not like before. At the door, the little boy leaned close. "Are you coming next Christmas?" I knelt beside him. "Maybe. But even if I don't, you'll still glow, remember?" He nodded solemnly and hugged me tighter than I expected. Behind him, Emily had followed. Silent, "Thank you for coming," she said, voice low. I didn't look angry. I didn't even look long. "Thank you for letting me." And then I stepped out. The night was cold, but calm. Street lights flickered. Snow hadn't fallen yet, but the air carried the quiet of something about to change. I placed my hand over the candle box, felt the warmth inside, and walked to my car, each step lighter than the last. The drive home was quiet, radio off, wipers brushing gently against a windshield misted by night. The candle box sat beside me on the passenger seat, still warm, still glowing faintly through the ribboned lid. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the window, tired eyes, soft mouth, and suddenly I remembered a moment, small, ordinary, but sticky. Years ago, Emily had just married Daniel. It was their first Christmas together. We'd spent the morning baking. She was careful, meticulous, measuring cinnamon to the dot. I offered to clean as she frosted cookies. She smiled. "You're really good at disappearing quietly," she said, half laughing. I'd laughed too, thought she meant it as a compliment. Only now, years later, did I hear it differently. Maybe that was always her wish, that I'd stay useful, but silent, helpful, but hidden. Still, that day, I remember tying the ribbon on her gift, a hand-painted ornament with their initials. She hadn't hung it this year. But that's okay, because I still remembered where I bought it, still remembered the look on her face the first time she saw it. Not everything we give lasts, but sometimes what it meant does. The light turned green, and I kept driving. When I got home, the house was dark, but not cold. I slipped off my shoes, unwrapped my scarf, and placed the candle box on the table. I stood there for a while, just watching it. So many years of giving, of remembering birthdays, baking extra cookies, showing up early to help, all packed into that one quiet box. I thought about leaving it unopened, keeping it sealed like a boundary, but then I reached for one of the candles, the one labelled Emily. I lit it, just one. Its flame flickered softly in the dark room, not demanding, not grand, just present. I didn't light the others. Not yet. Instead, I took the label from the one marked with my name and slipped it into the drawer with the Christmas cards, not to forget, but to remind myself that I still had a place, even if it wasn't always at their table, even if it looked different now. As the wax melted, its scent filled the room, orange peel, cedar, and a hint of clove. It smelled like warmth, like clarity, and I sat beside it, hands folded, watching the light move gently against the window. Outside, the snow had begun to fall, silently. The candle was still burning when I woke from the soft doze on the couch. The living room was tinted gold, flickers of flame against the glass, snow falling behind the window like ash in slow motion. I sat up, and for a moment, didn't remember where I was. Then I saw the candle, still steady, still quiet, and I remembered. The first Christmas after Daniel was born. I was alone then, too. Newly divorced, figuring out how to be enough for a baby who didn't know what was missing. Money was tight. Everything else tighter. But I'd saved up weeks of careful planning and bought a single toy train, wrapped it in newspaper, tied it with red yarn. Daniel was too young to remember that gift, too young to say thank you. But that moment, that small joy of giving, even when I had so little, that was the first time I realised love doesn't need witness. It doesn't demand applause. It just gives. Back then, I cried while feeding him, tears dropping into mashed peas, whispering promises into the soft fuzz of his baby hair. "One day, I'll make your holidays magical," I'd said, "even if no one sees it but you." And I did. Every year after, even this one. Even when the table wasn't mine anymore, I looked back at the candle. Its flame hadn't wavered, and somehow, neither had I. I sat back down beside the candle, still warm, still glowing, still holding everything I hadn't said. I thought of Emily again, her sharp words in the kitchen, her silence when I arrived with the candle box. I remembered how she once said, "You're really good at disappearing quietly." Back then, it stung, felt like being erased. But now I see the gift in it. Not vanishing, but stepping back so others could be seen. That wasn't weakness, it was love. Maybe she never meant it kindly. Maybe she still doesn't know what she said, what it carved. But I no longer need her to take it back, because I no longer carry it forward. I forgive her quietly, without conditions, without grand declarations. I forgive her, not because she asked for it, but because I need space inside me for something better. Peace. I placed my hand on the box, the lid slightly ajar now, the wax almost melted. "You don't have to understand me," I whispered, "but I will no longer disappear for you. Not bitter, not angry, just done." And in that silence, I felt the smallest shift inside, like a door creaking open somewhere deep within. 2 days later, I walked up the porch steps of their house. No note, no call, no warning. The wreath was still hanging faded red ribbon, just like every year. I held the box gently in my hands. The candles were cold now, but still whole, still hers. I placed it by the door, careful, centered. Then I stepped back. I didn't knock, didn't linger. As I turned to leave, I heard a sound, bare feet on hardwood. The door opened just slightly, and there she was, Emily. No makeup, hair loosely tied, eyes wide like she'd seen a ghost. She didn't speak, but her hand reached out, resting softly on the lid of the box. She didn't open it, not yet, but she didn't push it away either. For a long moment, we just stood, me at the edge of the steps, her in the warm light of the doorway. And in that stillness, everything we hadn't said hung between us like frost. Then I smiled, not the kind you give to someone, the kind you give to yourself, and I walked back to my car. The candle wasn't lit anymore, but somehow I didn't feel in the dark. I used to think love had to be loud, had to look like Christmas lights, grand gestures, crowded tables. But now, I know it can also look like this: a quiet candle on a windowsill, a gift left without a name, a smile that no one else sees. That's still love, that's still family. Even if it's changed, even if it isn't returned the same way. I didn't leave the box to be thanked, I left it to let go. And sometimes that's the greatest gift you can give to someone else, or to yourself. So tell me, if you were her, would you open the box? Or would you pretend it was never there?